Hey, it's Wilson. As a wedding photographer, I've got my fair share of lenses. Throughout the wedding day, I can use up to 5 lenses, and today I'm going to go over which lens I use in each part of the day. Let's get started. The first lens I'm going to cover is the 35mm f1.8. This lens is similar to what the eye sees, and is a good general purpose lens for documenting candid moments from 6 to 10 feet away. In order to get slightly tighter shots of people with this lens, you have to be standing fairly close, so I don't generally use this lens for portraits. Generally, I bring this lens out when I find myself in a tighter space, whether that space is physically smaller or the room is more crowded. This lens often acts as a substitute for me when the 50mm is too tight. Speaking of which, the 50mm f1.4 is actually my most used lens, and I can use it to shoot most of a wedding day. The 50mm lens is how I would describe two people in love looking at each other, which is what makes it perfect for couples photography. I also use this lens for 90% of my engagement photos. Next is the 85mm f1.8. Although this lens is considered the quintessential portrait lens, I actually primarily use it as my zoom lens, even though it only gives you about 3 times zoom compared to what the eye sees. I typically use this lens for the ceremony, as I can't get as close to the subject during that time, and I'll also use this lens for speeches for the same reason. Occasionally, I will use this lens for portraits if I really want to compress the background. It can make even the most distracting backgrounds disappear into blurry goodness. My second most used lens is the 24-70 f2.8. This lens is my second most used lens because it is so versatile. I'll use this lens primarily for the ceremony, as the ceremony has many quick fleeting moments that I can't afford to miss if I were to be changing lenses or walking closer to the subject. This lens allows you to shoot wide establishing shots all the way to closer cropped portraits without getting too close. Having an aperture of f2.8 means that the background won't be as blurry as if you use a prime lens of a similar focal length, such as a 35mm 1.8 or a 50mm 1.4, although the background is not bad. Similarly, having an f-stop of f2.8 means that this lens isn't as good when it's dark, so I'll stick to my prime lenses with smaller apertures instead. The one thing that I don't like about this lens is that it is quite large, but being so versatile, it kinda comes with the territory. I actually use this lens for most of the corporate events that I shoot, as having a super blurry background isn't as important for those photos, and I can bring just one lens to cover the whole event. And lastly, I've got my 16 to 28mm f2.8. This is my least used lens because it's a pretty niche lens. Being an ultra-wide angle lens, I use it to emphasize space. So say for example, to make a reception space look larger and grander than it actually is. Ultra-wide angle lenses are actually used a lot in real estate photography. Because of the lens distortion, it can make the room look bigger than it actually is. I also like to use this lens for packed dance floors, as it allows you to get a better feel for the ambience. Being an ultra-wide angle lens, you do have to shoot pretty close to your subjects, although once the dancing has started, people don't really mind. So you've probably noticed that I don't have a macro lens. So how do I get those ring shots when I shoot weddings? I actually used to have a macro lens briefly, but I decided that I would shoot the rings differently. So instead of shooting them super up close, I would style them with something so I wouldn't have to be so close. Eventually though, I was told by a fellow photographer to check out something called close-up filters. They're these filters that you screw onto the lens that basically acts as a magnifying glass for your lens, and for my purposes, they work just as well as a macro. For about $20, you can get a pack off Amazon that offers varying degrees of magnification. So that's my entire lens collection. I hope that was helpful to you, and maybe it has even informed your next lens purchase. If you have any questions about what was discussed today, don't hesitate to leave a comment and I'd be happy to get back to you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.